Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. This episode is brought to you by CampingSurvival.com. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including bug-out bags, long-term storage food, water filters, gas masks, and first aid kits. Check them out online today at CampingSurvival.com. Be sure to enter coupon code PrepperRecon for a 5% discount on your entire order. Today's guest is John Jacob Schmidt from Radio Free Redoubt. John, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about Radio Free Redoubt?
Yeah, I can tell you a lot about Radio Free Redoubt. This is, let's start from the beginning. About 2.5 years ago, I started the podcast, never having been in any kind of broadcasting or radio or anything like that before. But it started from a letter or an article, a piece that James Rawls from Survival Blog wrote, just about the state and condition that our country is in and where we're headed. And he called for a shifting of patriots, conservative people, to move to the inland Pacific Northwest, which happens to be where I live. And I had read this article that my father referred to me, and I thought it was a great idea and everything, but a couple weeks later I reread it and it just clicked. The message, the vision, I just caught it. And I thought, this has got to be more than just an article, just a piece written by somebody saying, hey, this is something that I think we should do. We should have conservative Americans pull back, condense and increase the numbers in certain geographical areas around the country to increase our chances of surviving what's coming to this country. And something more needs to be done. His philosophy was basically he didn't really want the American Redoubt concept to be a real high-profile movement. He wanted it to continue being a slow, silent, under-the-radar shifting of demographics to an already very conservative region. And I thought to myself, there's just not enough time. We can't count on this. Over the last 2 decades or so, there has already been a shifting of conservatives moving to the inland Pacific Northwest states of what's now the American Redoubt, which is Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, eastern Oregon, and eastern Washington, of course, now North Colorado. So I thought we have to expedite this because time is of the essence. And so Radio Free Redoubt is basically an audio radio platform to promote the American Redoubt movement.
Very cool. And it's really, really sort of catching fire, isn't it?
It really is. It's still under the radar per se. It's catching on among conservatives. It has a twofold, 2 dimensions to it. First of all, there are people who are aware of the American Redoubt movement and the concept of it, and they are moving here because of Radio Free Redoubt, because of James Rawls, because of the Charles Carroll Society, which is kind of like the Catholic version of the American Redoubt, the Radio Free Redoubt. It's a call for all God-fearing, liberty-minded patriots to relocate, and so it is growing. I mean, it's becoming it's definitely turned from concept to a movement, but it's a very pivotal point right now. It's just started to get the attention of some of the other news, still not the mainstream, thank goodness. But I know on Christian Broadcast Network and the 700 Club and some of these other Christian-oriented type of news outlets have been catching wind of it and starting to cover it. So there is a move of Christians and Jews into this area because of the American Redoubt concept. But also, there are just countless testimony of people who have moved here for the very same reasons, but never heard of the American Redoubt until they got here. And but you'll hear them say, you know, we prayed about this. We knew something's going on in our community, in our state, in our country, our region where we happen to be living. We felt prompted to move, but we didn't know where, and so we prayed about it, and we felt a strong calling, this pull, this leading to move to the Pacific Northwest. And then we find out it's a movement. We're joining others that are for the very same reasons. And these people are coming from all over, from California, from Illinois, from Florida, from Virginia, from Texas, all over. And so that's basically that's the other dimension to it. The people that are American Redoubt minded and other people are moving for the same reasons that are just now learning that they're part of something bigger.
And are there any other parts of the country with similar movements?
Yeah, there are actually. There are definitely strong pockets of conservatives around the United States, and those numbers are increasing. The numbers of conservative people that are relocating into already previously conservative areas are increasing. The American Redoubt movement is probably, well, definitely the most deliberate movement and effort that's taking place. But there are others. There's the Appalachians are very conservative, definitely very politically conservative region already, and there are people that are moving from some of your built-up urban areas and moving further into the rural areas of the Appalachians. Also across different places in the South, Kentucky, Tennessee, up in the Northeast, believe it or not, which we refer affectionately as New Europe. It farther up north in like the Adirondacks of New York is a very politically and fiscally conservative-minded, liberty-minded people up there. Completely different mindset from what you would think is the stereotypical New Yorker. They loathe the communist agenda that's taking place, you know, in the liberal parts of their states. So there are people that are moving further away from that urban setting into the rural settings, even in the Northeast. And so these are what will become future redoubts. There's no doubt about it. Texas is probably one of the most notable destinations for conservatives to move to. We've seen some high-profile people move there. You know, Alex Jones is set up out there. You know, he has the podcast. Glenn Beck moved to Texas for the same political reasons, you know, as far as the freedom, the liberty. But a lot of people are moving to the American Redoubt from Texas, and they're saying Texas is not the redoubt that we were hoping it would be. It's in danger of becoming a blue state, you know, within 10 years, and that's without this new amnesty bill. Even if that doesn't go through, they're concerned that Texas might be lost and become a blue state.
And we keep hearing a lot of stories about tyrannical police officers in Texas as well, so that's not good either. Kind of a bad sign.
Well, that's something that we're seeing all over the place, and really that comes down to an individual level. In every law enforcement agency, there are guys that need a short leash, because the the ego, the power, everything that goes along with that, being and living in that world, it has the potential to corrupt. But then also there's really good people. I know there's good people in the FBI. There's good people in local law enforcement, state level. So really that's an individual personal, behavior, that, we see everywhere. And we even in the American Redoubt, there's cases of, misuse of police power, and those people are held accountable when it surfaces.
Well, I think that's the difference. I think that there's been a few issues in Texas where the officers were not only not held accountable, but their abusive actions were upheld by their superiors and are going on to be upheld by the courts. I'm speaking specifically about Officer C.J. Grissom, who was he's a Army officer. I believe he's a sergeant. I don't want to misquote his rank, but I think he's a sergeant in the U.S. Army, and was just hiking with his son with his rifle over his back, and was abused and arrested, and had his rifle confiscated by a police officer that said that somebody called and said he looked menacing walking down the road.
I remember that story. The name didn't ring a bell. I didn't remember the guy's name, but I definitely remember the story, and I've seen the footage as well. Yeah, that's that kind of police state mentality. The problem that we're having with the expansion of the police state, it's pervasive everywhere, and it's unfortunate. That's why we're such strong proponents of Oath Keepers. The mission to remind those that are serving us in uniform in the military and in law enforcement that they make the right decisions, to uphold their oath and support the Constitution. And those numbers are increasing all the time, but we're still going to have to deal with the ignorant or belligerent police officer, and now especially with the Homeland Security training, the Southern Poverty Law Center training of our law enforcement, and now even our military, defining for them who the bad guys are, and they're really defining us, people that hold to conservative, constitutional, Christian values. And so we're going to probably see more of this, unfortunately. And what's happening is they're pushing and they're bending, and eventually something's going to break. There's just no way around that. People are only going to take so much of that.
Yeah, you're right. We're being labeled as the enemies. It was recently in a Fort Hood briefing. The soldiers there were told by their commanding officers that they were not allowed to donate to Christian churches or
Yes.
Tea Party organizations, or belong to a Christian church or a Tea Party organization, and they were told that Christians and Tea Partiers are tearing the nation apart.
Yes, those were the exact words they used.
And so
Absolutely.
That's exactly it. They labeled us as the enemy.
Yeah, and there's also an assault right now on our chaplains in the military, and they are under attack for their fundamental Christian beliefs and the biblical truths that they hold to, and they're told there's certain topics that are just flat you can't touch. The homosexual movement is probably the most protected now in the Petri dish and the test lab for social testing and social engineering, our military. It really has put our chaplains in a very difficult position. We need to remember to be praying for those guys, because some of them are leaving the ranks because they're so frustrated that they've been basically rendered ineffective in many cases, and in other times our chaplains are staying and they're standing their ground so that they can be as effective as they can within the parameters that they have. And time's coming where they're just going to have to make a decision. I mean, they're just going to get canned, thrown out, and rejected. But they're staying where they are so they can make a difference as long as they can. That's a tough situation.
Sure. Yeah, the chaplains are no longer allowed to pray in the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
And soldiers are no longer allowed to proselytize. So now if you're a Christian, basically the policy is don't ask, don't tell.
Isn't that strange how that got flipped around, huh?
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And then while we're on the subject of the military, Obama recently let several of his top generals go. Does that remind you of anything that was done by Stalin or Hitler?
Well, there's just two examples you just listed of a whole host of examples, a long historical trail of oppressive regimes have always gone through a purge at some point, and of course we're seeing testimony now where people on the inside are coming forward and they're saying we're given litmus tests asking if we would disarm American citizens. Anybody who has any type of any voice of dissent, even over things as controversial and public as Libya with oh my gosh, I'm just drawing a blank right here. Benghazi, the admiral, there's what 10 or 11 now high-ranking general officers that have been relieved of duty for speaking out against things within the administration or policies, or there's no explanation at all. They're just let go. And now those are high-level officers. Those are general-grade officers. It's not to count almost 200 officers that are not general-level ranks that have been released for a number of different reasons, politically driven, and many times without any explanation at all, just simply relieved from duty. That is an alarming number, and that is also that should be raising red flags for all of us. And the one thing that I suppose that we could hope and pray for is that those leaders, when the time comes, when this country finally has to confront what seems inevitable, that we will have some allies in some powerful positions, because we're going to need them.
Yes, we are. And you recently attended an Appleseed event. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
What a great organization. I completely endorse and support the Appleseed Project. I was sponsored, my family and I, in fact, two of my children and my wife and myself were able to attend a Appleseed event over in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And it was a 2-day shooting clinic, and a lot of their literature says, turning Americans into a nation of riflemen again. And it's true how we've lost that art, that skill, and the spirit of a rifleman. So it is a shooting clinic, but it's more than that. They do teach you how to shoot. I don't know if anybody who hasn't increased their shooting skills and tightened up their shot group and improved as a rifleman, as a marksman, going through an Appleseed event. But the history lessons that come from that, they are very April 19th centric. And of course, April 19th was the day of it was the following day after Paul Revere and the other horsemen rode through the townships on the eve of April 18th, warning that the regulars were coming, that the British regular troops were coming to disarm them. And of course, the following day, they had raised 14,000 militia members and colonialists armed, standing ready at Lexington Green and Concord to meet the British and to resist their efforts to disarm them. And that's, of course, when the shot heard around the world was fired that began the revolution. amazing history there that's for all ages. We had shooters as young as 9 years old and as old as, I believe, 70 or 71 years old. There, and everything in between, men and women. And what a great time, what a great experience.
That's fantastic, the way they can weave together the history of the first American Revolution with the skills of learning how to handle a rifle. And they teach you standing, sitting, prone, magazine changes, all of that, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They go through, it's all, they prefer that you have a semi-automatic rifle. Because of the cost of ammunition recently, the program was really intended for a military surplus rifle type shooting, the M1 Garands, the M1A, these type of M1 carbines and kind of the older military surplus rifles, but it just became so cost prohibitive because you go through about 400 rounds in a weekend. It's a pretty intensive clinic, and of course, that's anywhere from $600 to $800 in today's prices if you're shooting 30-06 or 308. So they now primarily shoot the 1022 rules the day on the ranges, but you do see the AR-15s, various different semi-automatic 22s, and of course occasionally you do see the older military style rifles. But they do incorporate the various different shooting positions. There's standing, there's kneeling, sitting, and prone. Really used to learn to use the sling to incorporate that into your shooting position for stability and accuracy. And it's just a really good time. And the instructors are second to none because their heart's in it. There's the passion there that they have for the project that they're involved in is it's very evident that their hearts are in it. And also, it's not just a shooting clinic. At Radio Free Redoubt, we are trying to work with the guys from the Appleseed organization. We'd like to see this in all of our schools, and now they do have programs set up within Appleseed where they can come without the shooting portion. They can come to a school, a civics group, library, any type of group, your home church group, Bible study, whatever you have, to come and give the history lessons that they share and teach the spirit of the April 19th lessons there for the people, and they do that. They go to schools, they go to civic groups, and they talk about that. So it also can be something that can fit an environment where maybe a 2-day shooting clinic might not be practical, and they can still get the same message.
We used to have shooting clubs in schools.
Yeah, that's when there used to be this thing called America. I don't know if you heard about it.
Yeah.
But
and they also had the Bible. Of course, then you can have guns in school because you had the Bible in school, and you probably had the 10 Commandments hanging on the wall that told people that thou shalt not kill, and they probably weren't told that they descended from an animal. So they had a little bit higher respect for human life because they didn't think they were just another animal.
Yeah, when they walked into a school, it wasn't because they were going to go shoot all their classmates and their teachers. It was because they were on the rifle team. They were responsible.
And they probably prayed before rifle team practice.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
We have changed.
So, speaking of the revolution, how did the Patriots in the revolution organize such a well-organized response with no Twitter, no Facebook? They didn't even have cell phones.
Well, the technical side of things, they had horses, and they covered a lot of territory. But the spirit there was different. When I see overwhelmingly large numbers of communities or conservatives within communities. And I see progressives trying to take positions like mayoral positions, city council member positions, county commissioner positions, and you see a conservative going up against a progressive. And in a extremely heavily tilting conservative area, and the liberals get voted in because there ends up, 10% of the conservatives show up to vote. I'm not convinced that we could raise, if the regulars were coming to disarm us, could we even raise 14 people who'd be willing to stand in the gap, much less 1,400 or 14,000 patriots? These are clergy. These are leaders, businessmen, whole congregations joining their pastor out on the field to stop tyranny, to stop them. Now we have from the pulpit teaching us that if they tell us that we have to turn in our guns, well, by gosh, that's just what we got to do. They ain't got an ounce of fight left in them. Americans don't have it left in them. There's few that do. I understand, even back then, only 3% approximately were actual shooters and willing to fight. Only a third of them really wanted independence. A third of them were loyalists to the crown, and a third of them just didn't care. They just wanted to make shoes or make candles and be left alone. It's the law of thirds. I don't think anything's changed. I think still we have a third of the people that they like the progressive idea and they want to be global citizens. A third of the people want to be American citizens, and a third of the people don't care because they're wondering, who's going to get voted off the island this week, or who's going to make it to the next round in American Idol, or whatever it happens to be, the sports and Fever Ford, March Madness is coming up, and all the. They're just distracted. They're entertained. They've got it good. And they're not at the point where they're willing to even consider pledging their lives, their fortunes, or their sacred honor so that we can have freedom. And
if they're not gonna vote, they're not gonna go stand on a line, draw a line in the sand, are they?
Yeah. I don't know. I just, on the other hand, I know people are waking up. There are people that are having discussions that will tell you, if I heard myself talking 5 years ago, I would have thought I flipped out and lost it. But they're talking about what's going on in our government. They're talking about the police state, this pervasive Department of Homeland Security buildup, preparing for war. And they're concerned. They're seeing the writing on the wall. So it is encouraging to see that people are waking up. And I mean people from all walks of life, blue collar, doctors, lawyers, salesmen, businessmen, plumbers, roofers, loggers, everything in between. And so they're waking up. There's some people very, very concerned about what's happening. There are some people that are planning for it. They're training for it. But man, could we raise 14,000 people in one night to stand and stop an advancement of a group of DHS that were coming to disarm us? I'm not confident there. I mean, I want to encourage that. I want to try to increase those numbers. I want to change that around. I want to say with confidence, absolutely we could raise it, but we're not there yet.
If we were there and we did have the numbers, we would be heavily dependent on electronic communications like cell phones and Twitter and Facebook and email to really get the message around right now because of just the way that our society communicates. If that were to be shut down, what would be some alternative forms of communication that people could use?
Well, there definitely are alternatives. Now, we've seen it recently in Africa and across the Arab world and Europe and France, including France, England, and even with the Occupy movement, word spreads. Iran was a real recent one, where Twitter, Facebook, all this stuff, information can flow instantaneous, real time intelligence. You can rally a lot of people, but of course the governments are getting pretty savvy to this, and we saw about 18 months ago, almost 2 years ago now, with the Occupy movement. They were planning a rally in the downtown area of San Francisco with all the public transportation and the whole downtown area. As they were getting ready to organize this demonstration, all of a sudden they're texting, Twitter, everything, internet access. The government killed it all. They flipped the switch and turned it all off. And so basically it rendered them ineffective at that point. Now then they went, they got on their bicycles instead of horses, and they went block by block, rousting the troops, and they still ended up being able to turn out a respectable a demonstration, from their perspective. But in any kind of a situation for preparing for an alternative, ham radio is probably the most effective method that I know of. And of course their slogan is, when all else fails, there's ham radio. And it really is true. We saw after Hurricane Katrina and the Hurricane Sandy, different situations like that where the very fragile cell phone, internet, power grid structure was disrupted. The ham radio operators were up and running almost immediately, and they were providing links for relief efforts and authorities and people searching, people looking for missing loved ones and things like that. So if any of that became disrupted from could be an attack on our power grid, anything like that, the ham radio is a great and wonderful tool to be able to do that. And we're big promoters at Radio Free Redoubt of the ham radio. Now, obviously, that could be jammed or disrupted depending on the situation. If you had somebody that was hostile toward you and they realized that you were using certain bands or frequencies, they could jam that. So you have to have redundant systems. You got to think ahead. You got to think outside the box a little bit. But just because somebody can jam your radio communications, it doesn't mean don't have a plan. Have a plan, and then you adapt it to the tactical situation as it requires. But at least start off with something. And we can't count just because so many people are really looking at the police state as the number one threat. They won't even go ham radio. They won't even go digital communications over radio or anything like that, because their argument is, the government can just jam it. They can shut it down. They can pinpoint your location. But we've got a lot of other potential threats that we could be facing. A computer hacking attack on our power grid system could shut that down, leaving people to fend for themselves. So we strongly encourage people to have communications involved. We developed a program called the Ch3 Project, which is incorporating the channel 3 on your CB radio or your FRS radio or your MERS radio, and ham operators are tied into that through a program called AMRON, or the American Redoubt Radio Operators Network. And that's something that was designed initially to keep the American Redoubt connected, to help coordinate efforts in a rebuilding after a collapse or a major disaster. But that net, which we hold regular nets, twice, the first and third Wednesdays and Thursdays of each month. But those are nets that are going on a regular basis. And since they began, they went nationwide. Now we have ham operators all over the country participating in these regular communications nets, and then you've got non-ham operators with shortwave radios listening in, so they're also gathering information and staying informed, which is going to be really important. Is the whole concept of the Amron Project was to help with the flow of information and to keep non-ham operators in the loop and participating in that as well. It's a great program.
Okay, so now Channel 3, you said you can use that with your CB or your FRS. And FRS is just like the regular walkie-talkies that you would get at Outdoor World, or you can get them on Amazon. They're $50-$60 a pair, depending on what you're getting. And that you would just turn it to Channel 3, and hopefully you would be able to connect with other like-minded patriots in your area.
Yeah, that's the concept of it, and it's starting to work. Now, not to confuse people or mislead people, you can't turn an FRS radio to Channel 3 and talk to a guy across town who's on his CB on Channel 3. They're in different parts of the spectrum as far as the radio frequencies. But so many people in the prepper world have CBs or they have FRS radios. To increase, to call for assistance and aid and help, and increase the chances of being able to contact someone else who is also like-minded, we standardized our communications. And this came from a retreat group network of people who, in case there's an emergency that went down, everyone agreed they would turn their FRS radios to Channel 3. Some people didn't have FRS radios, but they had CB radios. So, it kind of evolved into, we'll just turn those to Channel 3 too. So you don't have to remember anything, just Channel 3. Now, the reason why is because the national accepted hailing emergency channel on CBs is Channel 9. For FRS radios, it's Channel 1. MERS doesn't have any nationally standardized emergency channel. So we chose for preppers, redoubters, patriots, minded people, if they all standardized, you don't know who you're going to get if you turn on to Channel 1 or Channel 9. There are two-legged predators out there sitting there waiting for a little lamb to be bleeding out in the wilderness calling for help. And of course, if thinking like a predator, I would be listening to Channel 9 and Channel 1 on the FRS for the poor family that's got all their food stored up in the back of their SUV on the side of the road, asking if anybody can come and help them. So, anyway, that's why we chose Channel 3 to stay away from the crowds. And then of course the ham operators who are communicating across their communities and their regions and even across the country are also monitoring Channel 3. So it's just a standardized communication plan. So information can flow both ways. When somebody gets some information, a ham operator, that they're starting to incorporate checkpoints, for example, in certain parts of the country, and they're confiscating food storage from anybody who has, say, more than 3 days worth of food. Well, if you're living in an area where that's not happening yet, you'd probably really like to know that that's starting to happen in different parts of the country. It could help, it could affect your decision making if you're bugging out, if you are moving to your retreat location or what have you. So information or the lack of information can be a life or death issue. But if you're not a ham operator and these ham operators are sharing this information, you're pretty much out of the loop. That's why we designed the Amron program. So the ham or Amron operators who have this information would rebroadcast or retransmit over the CH3 channels, the FRS channel 3, CB channel 3, to keep even non-hams informed and in the loop. And of course that information flows both ways, because anybody that goes through, let's use the checkpoint example, just says, hey, a guy up in front of me is getting all of his food taken away. He called me and warned me I just want to let you know. So this information can flow throughout the network.
And if I wanted to participate in the AMRON net and I've got a shortwave radio, just any shortwave radio will work, or does it have to have single sideband?
No, that's a really good question. All of the ham operators transmit on almost always when they're using HF. That's your shortwave radio transmissions. They will be talking on single sideband. They can talk farther with much less power when they're using single sideband, and even more so in the digital modes. That's where you can't hear a voice. It's just it's a digital mode. I can explain that too if you.
We'd love to hear about it now. And when you do the net, you do one on Wednesday and one on Thursday. Is one of those voice and one of those is digital?
Yep, absolutely. And anybody can, you can go to RadioFreeReadout.com, click on the AMRON Nets tab, learn way more about it there in detail. But there are two different modes. There's voice and there's digital. Voice, of course, is just your voice going over the airwaves, just like you use a CB or an FRS radio. You click the mic, you talk into it. Well, your voice, the power that it takes to transmit a voice on radio has a very wide bandwidth, and it requires a lot of power. So, when you send a message digitally, just like on your cell phone, if you have a very weak signal, you might not be able to make a voice phone call. It keeps saying call lost. But with just one bar flickering, you lose your bar, it comes back, you get one bar. You can't quite talk voice, but you can send a text message to someone, and it goes right through. The reason why is because that digital message or the text message has a very narrow bandwidth, and it takes a fraction of the power to send that signal 2 or 3 times as far. And so, if you're in the mountains and you got to communicate using your cell phone, the smartest way to do it is just send text messages back and forth. It's going to prolong your battery life, and you can get signals through when you have otherwise a very weak signal. Well, the same thing applies to the ham radio. If you talk voice, it's going to require a certain amount of power. Now, that might not be a problem, but if you're in a grid down situation and you're operating off of let's say a car battery, amperage and wattage is a very precious commodity. So you might want to ration that. Well, if you can communicate as much as possible using digital modes, in other words, sending text messages over your radio, you can talk way farther away using way less power, and you can prolong the life of that battery and extend the useful life of the power that you have stored up. So with the digital modes and as I said, these nets take place on the first and third week of every month. Now, on Wednesday nights, it is strictly a digital net. And that's when they are sending a digital mode called PSK31. And when you're listening to this, it sounds like a garbled, warbly, screechy sound, kind of like the old style dial-up modems once it connects. It sounds similar to that, like radio teletype. But what that is actually a text message traveling across the airwaves. And to receive that, to decode that so it turns a sound into a text message, you can use on your laptop. You can use a free software. It's free to download, and has multiple different modes on there, including the PSK31 that will decode that for you. But the ham operators are going to be sending that using single sideband. So with your shortwave radio, you could just go from the headphone jack right into the microphone in on your laptop, and adjust your audio settings just like you would for making a Skype call or anything else. Make sure that it's detecting the sound, and there your text message is coming across the screen. And so it's really a lot of fun, and people from all over the country and Canada are communicating, and many times just listening in, just monitoring and receiving it, because they don't have a ham radio. They just have a shortwave radio with single sideband.
Well, that's fantastic. So if somebody's extremely far away from the readout, like myself, and I'm down in South Florida, I'm probably, like you said, it's going to take less energy on Wednesday night when they transmit the PSK31 digital messages. And so if I've got my shortwave radio with my single sideband, I'll go to the Amron tab at Radio Free Readout, and I'll get the frequency, and I'll set that, and I'll just play that, and I'll play that straight into my FL Digi program that I've set up on my computer, and maybe looked at a couple of tutorial videos on YouTube to figure out how that all works. And I have a good shot of actually being able to participate all the way down here in Florida.
You've got a great shot at it. In fact, when you to participate in the net, what we ask is for people to email in a report. And so what they do is they email Amron at radiofreereadout.com. And they'll say, hey, I'm in Orlando, Florida, and I heard 2 people call in with the net word of the week. We switch that up every week. This is to authenticate that you actually heard the net, and you heard the net word of the week. And so if you can't talk back, many times ham operators can hear another ham operator, but for some reason the other ham operator's not hearing him. So there's a ham operator out there talking to the wilderness thinking nobody heard him. But what he doesn't know is that another ham operator heard him, but something's wrong with his antenna, something happened, whatever. A little wire came disconnected, something happened where this ham operator can't hear the other guy talking back to him. Or he doesn't realize that there's 3 families out there huddled around their radio, listening to the net, hearing the information, hearing the net word of the week, or intelligence reports, or information coming across, but they're listening to this. Well, what these people do is they email in, because this is for training purposes, they email in saying, hey, I was listening to the net on the 20 meter band. And yes, you go right to that Amron Nets tab on radiofreereadout.com, and there's the frequencies that you need to tune into. The instructions and the frequencies are right there. So you tune into that and you listen to the net, then you report in, and it helps all the ham operators understand what their reach, what their limitations, what their capabilities are. And it's also an encouragement to them, because there's been ham operators that have gotten frustrated. They said, I've been doing this for the last 3 weeks. I haven't heard anything back, but I keep calling out. But I put the net word of the week out. But I'm just not hearing anybody else come back to me. And what they don't know is that 3 or 4 or 5 people heard them, got all excited, and they were participating in that. So we just encourage people to keep transmitting, keep reaching out there, even though you think nobody can hear you. So anyway, it's just it's been really a fun project. And it's one we hope that we never need for a real world emergency situation. But if we do, it's the best way that we've been able to come up with to keep like-minded patriots, preppers, connected, whether you're a ham operator or not.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. I think that communications is one of the areas that preppers consistently really fall short in. Especially the ones that they just don't have the inclination or the money or the time to get into ham radio. And this is a way that everybody can get involved, because shortwave radio with single sideband doesn't really cost that much, and most of us
No.
already have a computer or a laptop, and the FL Digi program's free. So this is a great thing to get people thinking about how they are going to communicate post collapse or post stuff hits the fan or whatever. And now, would people be able to go to the archived podcasts of Radio Free Readout and learn more about communications? Because this is probably sparking a lot of curiosity in a lot of minds, and a lot of people are probably, I know Radio Free Readout really whet my appetite for communications that I was really totally neglecting before I started listening.
Well, you know, the mission of Radio Free Readout has shifted from the original vision because things emerged that we didn't anticipate, like the hunger that people have for learning communications and understanding the need for it and the importance of it. And now this demand has been created, and we're going, well, it's not really, I mean, we never just never saw ourselves as, you know, the source that people are coming to learn more about communications. And so we are addressing that. Yes, you can go to the previous podcasts, but I mean, we've been on the air for, you know, 2.5 years now, coming up on 2.5 years. That's a lot of podcasts to go back through and listen, because we cover a variety of topics. So what we're doing is, we're putting together some training, that we are going to address. It'd be a monumental task to go back through all of the podcasts and pull all the segments that we talked. We've sprinkled it all throughout. Digital communications, introduction to ham radio, introduction to the Ch3 Project, Morse code. There's been so many things that what we're doing is working on a project right now that hopefully by the first of the year we'll be able to start producing audio files and accompanying YouTube videos to walk the person through the introduction, Communications 101, Prepper Communications 101, and introduce them to the different radios. You know, most people don't understand the difference between you know, FRS radios, MERS, and CB. And, well, it's simple. You know, one's VHF, one's UHF, and one's in the HF band. And then they stare at you with their eyes glazed over because they still have no idea what you're talking about. So we understand that. And so the whole point is to get them from a ground level Communications 101 and compartmentalize these so you can go back and learn on a different subject. There is a lot of, one of our phrases is, YouTube is your friend. Remember, YouTube is your friend. People come, they say, man, you know, I really I'd like you to do a segment on, maybe, encrypted email. Like, well, YouTube is your friend. Because there's, you know, 1,000 people that have already done that. And so, you can learn so much about these digital communications out there, but we really want to start producing these that are oriented toward the Prepper, Patriot, American Redoubt, you know, minded people. And one of the things I really want to encourage people to do, communications, for most people, they're scrambling to try to get their preps in order. It's all they can do to buy an FRS radio. You're asking somebody to invest in a completely new hobby that most people don't have the time or money for. And it's a commitment to be a competent, reliable radio operator. It is an investment of time and money, and it takes effort. So what we encourage people to do in your group, in your retreat group, your prepper group, or in your family, pick one person as the communications expert. Find the person who has, they're drawn to it. They're fascinated by it. Something they've always wanted to do, or whatever it is. And that is your communications person. And then you invest in that person. You help them get the study materials to study for their technician's license and become a ham operator. You help them get a police scanner. You help them get for the group or for your family, get a shortwave radio receiver with single sideband. And that person's job is to completely immerse themselves in the communications aspect of your total group or family preparedness. They become the communications expert. Now everybody should know how to make a radio call. They should understand the proper procedure for picking up a radio in any emergency or situation and be able to turn that radio on and make it work. But there's a lot of people that unfortunately have the mindset that they don't want to get a ham license because they don't want to be on a list or whatever the reason is. They don't want to get no license and be told what to do or whatever. They don't want to be tracked. They don't want to be. So what they'll do is they'll buy all this ham radio gear for doomsday, and then they stick it in a box, and they think they are going to pull that out and use it on game day. And they will not. I promise you, you will not. Any competent ham operator or radio operator is going to tell you, you are not going to communicate with anyone. You're going to be frustrated, and you may as well just spend all that on food or something. You know, unless you stumble across somebody who knows how to operate that stuff. And even then he's going to say, man, you did not set this stuff up. You hosed us. There's software that we need to run this program. There's, this needs to be done. You didn't realize you needed a cable adapter. I mean, there's so many things. You know, somebody gets a ham radio, and they finally get talked into getting their ham license, and then they realize they had no clue what a PL tone was. And they thought they were going to use a ham radio to talk to people, and they just didn't realize how much they didn't know. So I would just definitely want to encourage people to get at least designate one person to become the communications expert. Every experienced person will tell you that there is so much to learn. There's bugs to work out. There's stuff that doesn't work right, and you don't realize it until you get your hands on it and start using it.
Well, if you're a Christian, you're already on a list. Or if you're a Tea Party member, if you've ever been involved in anything Tea Party, you're already on a list.
If you ever voted for Chuck Baldwin, if you're
any third party candidate,
homeschooler,
Ron Paul,
yep,
you're on a list.
If you're a homeschooler, if you're opposed to abortion,
you're on a list.
Yeah.
So we're probably already on a list. So that's probably not a good excuse, is it?
No, absolutely not. You're on a list anyway. And if not, you're gonna be.
And
because they're gonna make new lists.
And if you're not, shame on you.
If you're not on a list,
if you haven't done something to get on a list by now, quit listening to Prepper Recon podcast and Radio Free Readout, because you're an agent. You're an agent.
You are a useful idiot. Go somewhere else and drink Kool-Aid. Because you're obviously not going to get in the game. We need people that are going to get involved.
That's right.
That's
Amen. It. And your show is every Sunday night?
Yes, sir. Every Sunday evening at 8 o'clock Mountain Time, 7 o'clock Pacific.
10 o'clock Eastern?
10 o'clock Eastern. Let's see. Let's go through all the time zones.
And 9 o'clock Central.
Oh, that's a good point. That's why we use Zulu time for all of our communications nets. Ham operators are worldwide. I don't care if you are a air traffic controller, if you're in law enforcement, if you're military, if you're whatever. Zulu time. Anytime you're operating in an environment that covers multiple time zones, Zulu time is the rule. And of course, when you see those time zones on there, we've got calculators on there that you can go to figure out what time, Zulu time is. But 7 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Mountain, and that's every Sunday evening at did I say 7? No, 8 o'clock. It's 8 o'clock Pacific and 9 o'clock Mountain. We used to broadcast at 7 p.m. Pacific, and we moved that to 8 p.m. But that was almost a year ago, so it's been like that for a while. But if you miss it on Sunday evening, you can always, that evening, late that evening, we upload the audio to the podcast player, so you can download that throughout the week, and you can also go to iTunes, punch in Radio Free Redoubt, you can download it there. We've got links that'll take you to Podbean, the Podbean site, where all of the previous show plus all of the archive shows are located. You can download any or all of those, and then of course after every show on Sunday evening, we put a posting up called the Highlights and Resources posting for that show. So it will take you to links, videos, resources, everything that we discussed during that show, so you can go and read more about it. And in that Highlights and Resources posting, we also post the audio version of that show.
Very cool. And of course we'll have links to Radio Free Redoubt in today's show notes. But for the folks that are listening on Stitcher, iTunes, and YouTube, can you just tell them one more time what the website is?
Yes, it's www.radiofreeredoubt.com, and Redoubt is spelled with a B, so it's REDOUBT.com. And of course from there that'll take you to, you can click on any of the links that'll take you to our Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, all of that stuff.
John Jacob Schmidt, thanks again for making time to come on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. It was great being with you. I look forward to it, and we'll definitely do it again.
Hey Prepper Recon fans, I just published my new book, American Exit Strategy, Book 1 of the Economic Collapse Chronicles. Liberty-minded individuals who believe in the Constitution will find this near-future dystopian novel to be right up their alley. Those who are looking to be more informed about the potential threats to America's financial stability will learn what to watch for and how to prepare themselves for an economic collapse. American Exit Strategy uses survival fiction to take an in-depth look at the real-life politics and economics behind the issues that are likely to trigger a currency collapse or financial meltdown in the near future. American Exit Strategy is a work of fiction until it becomes history. Go to AmericanExitStrategy.com today to learn more or purchase your copy for Kindle in PDF format or paperback. Happy prepping.